Holding a rally tonight in South Carolina, and with no clear establishment alternative or governing alternative, whatever you want to describe that lane, emerging yet, the race could turn into a showdown simply between Trump and Cruz. Let's go to the lid right now. We're here with me, Steve McMahon, Democratic strategist. Bill Kristol, sorry, Bill.
I don't know whether to thank you or be offended.
Editor of the Weekly Standard, I feel your pain. And Susan Glasser, editor of Politico. Bill, let me start with you. Is this a two-way race, or how much longer can the governing class here try to will themselves into a three-way race?
Well, someone will be, assuming Trump and Cruz, or Cruz and Trump are first and second in South Carolina, someone will be third, and that person will then survive and go on to fight, because there are a lot of Republicans who don't like Trump on the one hand and think Cruz is
there's money to be had, right?
There's plenty of money behind that candidate.
Whoever the third place candidate is.
And there are votes behind that candidate in many, many states. Having said that, I now do think that the best chance to stop Donald Trump is for a conservative to stop him, not for the establishment to stop him.
So that's Ted Cruz?
Yeah, I think so.
So you're in the Limbaugh territory.
I'm just saying, I think analytically, Cruz now has the single best chance to stop Trump. Doesn't mean Rubio, Kasich, Bush, one of them couldn't emerge and end up, or the two of them could stop Trump. Cruz, I just think, could take on Trump on the issues, issues that Republican primary voters care about.
Susan, looks like Kasich, Rubio,
Bush.
Kasich, Rubio, and Bush. It's going to be a bloodbath.
You know, if you come out of New Hampshire and the best slogan that you have is "I'm not dead," which is what Jeb Bush said last night, you know, it's not a rousing.
I think Marco Rubio is saying that too, in fairness, right?
No, he's saying "I won't screw up again." There's a slightly different slogan, but look, they're in the circular firing squad moment, and rather than focusing on Trump or Cruz at this point, who have emerged much stronger from the first two states, you have these three guys focusing on each other in what seems like a sort of deadly race to the bottom.
Well, it does. I mean, I assume Jeb and Rubio, I mean, what I can't figure out is Rubio and Cruz. I think Cruz Cruz does fear Rubio.
Right.
Of any of them, he fears Rubio the most. So he may pile in on that. But it seems that everybody ought to just focus on one person they want to go after. That when you start looking both ways, you end up going nowhere.
Well, I mean,
that's what happened to Jeb.
In New Hampshire, they sort of did that, right? Everybody kind of decided that Marco Rubio might be the nominee unless somebody throws themselves in front of him to stop him. Chris Christie did that in the debate. He won the exchange. He lost the election.
Somebody said, and I don't know who said it, a guy from Jersey whacked a guy from Florida and left him up there almost for dead in New Hampshire.
And look where the guy from Jersey is now. He's suspended his
Didn't work for him.
But I still think, you know, right now the threat set is a little bit different. John Kasich looks a lot different today than he did a couple days ago, and especially after Chris Christie gets out of the race, because if you're looking for a moderate Republican governor and you were attracted to Chris Christie, it's either going to be a Kasich or a Bush.
Make this deal?
Yes. Why do you think he's underestimated? I keep hearing, well, Kasich has nowhere to go, whereas Bush and Rubio do. So Bush and Rubio are like a 10 in the polls in South Carolina, and Kasich's a 2. But after Kasich's third-place finish, he'll be close to them, I would predict, in the first South Carolina poll. And then there'll be that debate Saturday night. We've seen the debates have mattered in this race.
I think this one will matter a lot.
Absolutely. Which of those three? Well, I'd say which of the three, quote, establishment candidates emerges, which can avoid just squabbling and being part of the circular firing squad, and maybe attack either Cruz or really, I think, Trump, and show that he could be the guy who could take the fight to Trump. And then the Cruz-Trump debate, as we've seen on the show already, is now getting intense. And I think Cruz has tactically decided for most of the campaign to avoid fighting Trump. Might have been a wise decision. He's had a pretty good showing so far, Cruz, a first place and a third place. Now he knows he's got to take on Trump directly. And those two are good. That's a pretty heavyweight debate, Cruz and Trump, you know?
No, it could be. All right, let's move to the Democrats. What's the level of panic that Brooklyn should have?
Probably more than they had for the last 6 months. I think, you know, that's part of it. This is the part that's very familiar to Clinton watchers like you, right? The 2008 sort of redone.
Well, February was a disaster in 08, and here we are in February of 16. It feels very similar.
And amazingly enough, if you look at the numbers, I was shocked to find out Hillary Clinton got fewer votes in New Hampshire than she did in 2008. Now, that was her big comeback moment against Obama from Iowa, but it's pretty shocking.
That's stunning to get fewer votes against one guy, and there she was running against two substantial figures at the time.
That's right.
Here's the irony, though. So in 2008, what happened was you went from these states where President Obama, candidate Obama at the time, sort of shocked the world by hitting her in Iowa, and then she came back in New Hampshire. And then as they rolled south to the more diverse electorate, Barack Obama's strength became apparent because in the more diverse electorate, he obviously did better. She actually is going to be probably saved by the very thing that undid her last time, which are the black and minority voters.
Are you convinced of that?
I'm not convinced of it, but I think, the firewall is there. It's called the firewall for a reason. They built it because they knew they had a problem in Iowa, and they knew they were weak in New Hampshire, and I think that, she's got the strength that comes with having, that community has a lot invested in the Clintons over the years.
Before I let others jump in on here, what's Sanders doing right that Dean got wrong? You were in Dean world.
Well, he's first of all, I think that he built his campaign to last. Obviously, there was a moment in Iowa for Howard Dean that was unfortunate that actually kept us from seeing how it might have ended.
He had, at the time, for what was...
Well, I think they actually learned from the Dean campaign because we had a lot of orange hats out there, but we didn't have a lot of people going to the caucuses. They had the enthusiasm that we had in Iowa, but they actually had people going to the caucuses. The other thing I think he's doing is, he understands a lot better kind of where the pressure points are. Howard Dean had the Iraq War. Bernie Sanders has a whole range of things he's doing. And right now, I think it's interesting what he's doing on the whole racial disparities and prison reform, because this argument is going to ultimately lead to who do you think put all those kids in prison to begin with? It was the crime bill.
Right, Bill. He voted for the crime bill, too. But, Bill, big picture, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders won the New Hampshire primary. Political establishments got their butts handed to them.
Yeah, and clobbered their opponents.
Yeah,
Trump more than doubled his next person. Sanders, I can't get over the Sanders margin. 20-plus points over
This is a wholesale rejection of leadership, of the leadership class to me.
Yeah, with the failure of the leadership class,
right.
I think. And I'd just say on that, the firewalls is a leadership idea, and my experience is that the thing about firewalls...
The minute you say you have one?
When you say that word, I think that firewall is burning down.
Those super delegates, right? We've heard a lot about that today. The conventional wisdom is always wrong about presidential campaigns. You just have to know which part of it and when, right?
That's your job as editor of Politico.
She does have an overwhelming lead with African-American
We'll see. We'll see if it holds. Thank you, guys. Steve, Bill, and Susan. We'll be back tomorrow with more MTP Daily. I'll have a little better voice. With all due respect, though, starts right now.